Hey, this is Brian Gibbons. We've got a great guest today. Terry is a mortgage loan originator, MLO, for seller finance deals in California and soon to be in 37 other states. Terry, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I can't tell you how pleased I am for you to be with us today, because we are creative real estate investors, and we're looking to be able to be Dodd-Frank and SAFE Act compliant, and I know you can help us do that. For people that are brand new to seller financing, it basically, the seller is helping a buyer buy the property on terms, and that could be a wraparound mortgage, that could be a lease option, or some other tool that's legal in the state. So, Terry, can you help explain how can you help real estate agents and real estate investors with the compliance issues with Dodd-Frank and the SAFE Act?
Okay, well, first of all, seller financing is not new. Back in the 80s, when I was in my early 20s, I was a broker, and we did probably 20 to 30% of all transactions were seller financed, because interest rates were well over 10%, up to 14 at a certain point. So this is not reinventing the wheel, and it's not new. And the SAFE Act and the Dodd-Frank Act, after the meltdown of the last few years of the financial system and almost a collapse, the government felt they had to create more laws. And so we're under some compliance issues with regards to seller finance, but it's not a bad thing. It's just about knowing how to navigate through them, and it ends up being a good thing because everything gets disclosed up front, buyers and sellers, and then everybody's happy moving forward, and so you have to look at it as a positive thing as well.
Well, I totally agree. To me, there's great opportunity right now with the low inventory. The Wall Street Journal had a great article about why is there low inventory, and they basically said there's three major reasons. One of the reasons why there's low inventory is people don't have any equity at all, or they have like 5% equity, and they can't list that house with an agent. It's just not feasible. It's not a good idea for them to do that. And they may have bought at the top of the market, like 2006 to 2008, and they don't have any equity to be able to use those funds to close the transaction, let alone get into the next house. So that's the first reason. And that they said there's something like 10 million of those houses in the United States, not just California, but on a national basis. Another reason is people need to move up. They need to go from a small house to a bigger house, and they need about 20 to 30% equity in that, and they don't have it. They might have 5% or 10% equity in the house, so they can't move up. And that really restricts another 10 million of those houses where people want to move up and they can't. And lastly, another reason is people are speculating that the houses are going to be worth more in the next 12 months, so they don't want to sell at the bottom of the market. So for those three major reasons, realtors are having a hard time getting listing agreements, and that's those three reasons, to me, make the most amount of sense why there's low inventory. And I think seller financing can really help the listing presentation with these agents to be able to get more listings on seller financing terms. What do you think about that?
Well, I agree with everything that you just said, and I'd like to add maybe another, if not more reasons, but you've got student loan debt and the millennial under 30 generation that can't qualify because of the debt they've racked up going to school, and now they have to pay it off. I think that's a real big impact on demand. You have, and I agree with the people that held on to their homes and didn't go through foreclosure or short sale. They're upside down or very close to it. They can't pay the fees for a real estate agent, and the agents aren't educated enough to know how to navigate and solve people's problems that way. They're all about, well, there's no equity in it. I can't get paid, so I can't help you.
Right.
And that's you've got to find agents that are creative enough to solve those problems for people, or an investor that solves those problems. The American dream is alive and well. People want to own homes, and it's the demand is there, and the supply is restricted, and there's and then the third thing that I would say, adding on to your comment, is the loans are impossible to get. You have, under Dodd-Frank, you have appraisal problems where the appraisers now can't look forward and say, you know what, there's a good market, and the definition of a sales transaction or a value that a property is worth is two parties, a buyer and a seller, in an arm's length transaction, given the freedom to make a decision on what they think the value is. Now, an appraiser has to go in and look at the neighborhood and say, oh, well, there was 10 homes in here and 5 of them were short sales, and therefore I'm not going to put my name on the line and say that the price that we have here under contract is worth that property is worth that price, and that's a problem.
Oh, I totally agree. And to be a victim of an arbitrary decision by an appraiser like that, that says that your property is worth perhaps even 10% less than what the comps are, it makes no sense. But the banks aren't stupid. They're going to protect their interest. So, seller financing doesn't have that problem. I believe that if you do a good CMA on your property and find out what properties have sold in the last 3 to 5 months, and the same square footage, same lot size, all the rest of that other stuff, you can sell at that price or maybe even 2% higher with seller financing. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, seller financing allows you to be creative. It's not only with price. You might be able to get a 10% higher price, and have the seller carry a loan at a lower interest rate than they normally would want. They're only going to get 2% in the bank if they cash out, plus they're going to pay 30% capital gains, depending on the state. Maybe if they would normally get a 5 or 6% interest rate on carrying the loan, maybe they get an extra 5 or 6% on the price and carry a 3% interest rate, because maybe they have a capital gains issue and they don't want to be paid off on that loan ever. They want income from it. And so it really gives a seller a way to strategize for their capital gains and their retirement maybe in the future. There's just so much you can do with it. It's just fire the banks. That's my mantra. Get rid of them. And let us solve our own problems.
Oh, look, I totally agree. The pendulum has swung way too far for a lot of things. I mean, whether it's handguns or mortgages or financial planners getting invaded, as far as, people are getting so scared to do any business. Banks don't want to help people anymore because there are liability issues. I mean, the penalty for Dodd-Frank is huge. If you're considered that you didn't do it right and the ability to repay rule wasn't followed, I mean, poor sellers can really get screwed. And that's why you do need the services of somebody who is an MLO, somebody who can give you the safe harbor. And so if you do go to court, you've already done your job, and you can't get screwed in a court of law with a bad seller finance ability to repay rule being followed. So what kind of strategies could a real estate agent use to amend their listing presentation? Let's say that we had a house, just for numbers' sake, it was worth $100,000 and they owed $95,000. So there's not a lot of equity in there. What could an agent say to their potential listing presentation seller? Any advice for them?
Yeah, well, an agent or an investor really has to be educated on what the possibilities are. It's unconscionable for a real estate agent to not know what the options are. The days of giving your lender's card to the buyer and say, go get qualified and I'll sell you a house based on what this person says is just not a way of doing business anymore and ever again. And for someone to be doing that, they really shouldn't be in the business. So every listing or every agent that takes a listing should have a conversation with that seller and say, look, here's different options for selling your house. And they should have a conversation about seller carry, lease option, lease purchase, wraparound mortgage, and all the ramifications. And really that's what Dodd-Frank was intended to do, was have the consumer, even the SAFE Act, have the consumer be fully informed and aware of what the possibilities are, and not have an agent or a mortgage broker kind of guide them or steer them into something that wouldn't necessarily be in their own best interest. And that's really what's behind it, and that's where these laws came from. And as long as everyone's disclosed and everything's out in the open, you can pretty much do anything that you used to be able to do.
Well, there's a bit of disinformation about, some brokers might steer their agents away from seller financing for a couple of reasons. One is they're scared of the due on sale clause with a wrap, or they don't get their commission up front like they do with the 6% solution. And this is going against their fiduciary duty to show all the options to the seller. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I mean, I've been an advocate for helping real estate investors and agents to be able to help sellers and buyers sell and buy on terms any way that's legal, any way that's possible. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's with these new laws. Is there any advice you could give to real estate investors that want to, be creative in this marketplace, and they're talking to let's say a deal that's 20% equity, it's a pretty house, and they want to help that seller sell on terms? What could they say to a seller of a house that has a small amount of equity, not a lot, maybe 20%?
Well, I think what you have to do is ask the seller what their goals are, and knowing what they are, give them suggestions on what would best fit their needs. They could sell it and have the buyer come in and get a new loan. That would be one thing to do. They could, if it's an investment property and not their own personal residence, you'd have to talk to a CPA and see how depreciated the property is. You might want to wrap around the mortgage and try to get some type of installment treatment to minimize their taxes, because maybe they've taken maybe it's highly depreciated and they really. In fact, that last year I had a seller that had, in the boom, had taken all the equity out of the house. They've owned it for 20, 25 years. Basis was zero. and I said, okay, and I set up a buyer to basically take over her upside down loan. And it was upside down by $20,000, but she did a HARP refinance, and it had a 30-year fixed loan at 3.5%.
Wow.
And she just wanted out. And I said, okay, well, we'll pay all the escrow fees, and you can retire and just be done with this and go travel. Well, and I did ask her if she talked to her CPA about the capital gains taxes and that. And she said, yeah, everything's fine. But, a day before it closed, she called me and said, you know what, I can't do this. I have a $100,000 tax bill. Oh. And I said, okay, well, I wish you would have let me know, done what I told you to do earlier.
Right.
But I understand. And so, you really, as an agent and as an investor, you're out there to solve problems, and you can get a good return and meet your goals by just being, meeting people's needs.
Exactly. Well, I'm just so excited that my California students have access to you now as an MLO that is got deep experience with the SAFE Act and the Dodd-Frank, and they can get compliant paperwork for their loans if they're doing some kind of seller carry or lease option or lease purchase or wraparound mortgage or a contract for sale or anything that's legal in the state of California to be able to help. And also real estate agents out there, you can get more listings by being more creative and helping the seller sell on terms versus for cash in this low inventory market. In closing, do you have anything else to add to this that you can think of?
Well, I really, Brian, appreciate you having myself and on today, and I feel like I feel alive with possibilities. I just think that I love real estate. I have for 30 years, and this is something that there's new laws. And there's opportunity everywhere out here. There's low inventory. There's great demand for these homes. And there's a real opportunity for people to meet their needs. And we do the compliance part of the Dodd-Frank and the SAFE Act and help people structure their transactions as well as I know you do. But we're actually, we can actually do the paperwork and make them compliant. So I really appreciate you having me, and I'd love to, pick up the conversation again in the future.
Well, we're going to be putting this video under, Dodd-Frank SAFE Act compliance paperwork and on our website. So the people that Terry can help are the following. If you're a real estate agent, you have a seller financing deal, low equity deal, upside down house deal, you should be talking to Terry. If you're a real estate investor and you're doing lease option assignments or sandwich lease options and you want to underwrite the tenant buyer just to protect the seller's interest, you need to talk to Terry. If you're a mortgage broker and you're very confused about Dodd-Frank or SAFE Act or something along those lines, you should be talking to Terry. So if you're in California, please, Terry's information will be below this video. Just give him a call, and he'll help you. And I'll also have his email address there. But I'm just so pleased that we have such an expert in California now about Dodd-Frank and SAFE Act compliance and the paperwork that's needed. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
All right. You're very welcome. Hope to talk to you again. Bye-bye.